Hello, everyone. My name is Julia Rosenzweig, pronouns she, they. I'm the Archive and Outreach Manager for the Curve Foundation. You are attending the panel called Women's Sports Bar Owners Changing the Game. This panel is part of the Curve Foundation's Beyond the Rainbow program, a groundbreaking conversation series that seeks to create an intersectional, multi-generational space touching on gender, queerness, race, ability, and activism of yesterday and today. Just a note that this event is being recorded and we do have closed captions enabled if you need them. The Curve Foundation champions lesbian, queer women, transgender, and non-binary people's stories and culture through intergenerational programming and community building. And today's programming is a celebratory feature of Lesbian Visibility Week, which Curve hosts across North America. In addition to Beyond the Rainbow and Lesbian Visibility Week, we also steward the Curve Magazine Archive, which is awesome. It's free and accessible online. We activate its documentation of 30 years of lesbian culture through our community programming initiative, Curve Conversations. We also provide fellowships to queer journalists in partnership with NLGJA, the Association of LGBTQ+ journalists. So today's panel is going to be really special. Our participants will explore the intersection of queer culture and sports, the unique challenges of running an LGBTQ+ inclusive business, and how each bar creates a welcoming space for queer women and allies to come together, celebrate sports, and build lasting connections. We will be having a brief Q&A portion at the end of the program, so please save any questions until that time. You will be able to raise your hand either virtually or physically, and I'll call on you. You can also write your question in the chat to be read out loud. And just a reminder to please mute yourselves during this event. And then now I'm going to briefly introduce our panelists and let them get going. So first of all, we've got Jillian Hiscock, is the owner of a bar of their own, the Midwest's first sports bar to exclusively show women's sports. After years of feeling like her fandom didn't matter to traditional sports bars, she opened a bar of their own in March 2024 as an inclusive, family-friendly space dedicated to prioritizing women, non-binary, and trans folks on and off the TV screen. Earlier this year, she was named a Women in Business honoree by Minneapolis St. Paul Business Journal. Congratulations to Jillian. Jillian's a lifelong learner, community builder, and eternal optimist, excited to elevate and amplify women's sports to the level they deserve. And next, we've got Jack Steiner, owner of Watch Me Sports Bar, who brings the women's sports bar movement a unique background in creative operations across numerous industries. As an athlete and recreation admin major, Jack's honed those early skills of program planning and project management throughout her career, from entertaining to advertising, marketing, and production, yet never let go of the dream to work in the sports sector and opened her own sports bar. Jack's unwavering desire to celebrate women's sports led her to open California's first in the segment, with unique goals to further expand on the space. Jack's and wife, co-owner Meg and Eddie, live in Long Beach with their adorable fur babies, don't we all? Founder and CEO Jenny Nguyen opened the Sports Bra, the first sports bar in the world 100% dedicated to women's sports in Portland, Oregon in April 2022. The dream to open the bar was driven by Jenny's passion for sports, particularly women's basketball, and her desire to create a safe and welcoming space for all sports fans. With over 15 years of experience as a chef, she's leveraged her skills to create a welcoming and authentic space with delicious food and drinks, and most recently announced franchising to bring the sports bar nationwide. Very exciting. Next, we've got Danielle Tho and Sara Jurgovich. They're the owners of Rikki's in San Francisco's first women's sports bar there, opening in late May. Friends and business partners, the two met playing soccer together for the San Francisco Spikes, an LGBTQ+ soccer club, and bonded over their shared struggle to find a bar to watch the WNBA, NWSL, and other women's sports. Named after local lesbian bar owner and women's sports enthusiast Rikki Stryker, Rikki's is dedicated to celebrating women's sports and serving the diverse and inclusive women's sports community. Danielle's professional background includes a decade in affordable housing development and policy, bringing lots of spreadsheets and construction experience to the project, while Sara brings over 10 years of experience in marketing and customer experience. Sounds like a great match. And last but not least, we have our moderator, Shelly Breen. Shelly is an author and master certified life coach who supports her clients in living their best lives. She's a former high school and collegiate coach, a three-sport collegiate athlete, and spent time working in the WNBA, managing the Minnesota Lynx sales department, as well as consulting and training for the New York Liberty, the League, and the 10th anniversary All-Star Game at Madison Square Garden. Shelly is an entrepreneur who founded grants helping Minnesota girls with financial barriers to participating in sports, and her greatest love is becoming a children's book author. Check out her series, Shelly being the Sports Queen, with a tough little gender nonconforming girl and her friends who love to play sports. Shelly spent her first years in Minnesota and recently moved to San Francisco with her partner. Now I'm going to hand over the reins to Shelly Breen, and let's get started.
Hey, hey, welcome everyone everywhere watching this Zoom. We're so glad to see so many names and faces, and I am absolutely honored to be with all these trailblazing queers. A little over a year ago, when a bar of their own opened in Minneapolis, which is where I was living, um, it felt like the old days of being like 20 years old and being at the gay bar with the closeted and the out lesbians. And I mean, it was just an amazing feeling looking all around and seeing these familiar faces. But at the same time, the crowd was so much more than that. There were cis men cheering and drinking sodas and kids eating chicken nuggets and watching Unrivaled and coloring at their table and old people, white people, people of color. The bar was literally a microcosm of society, right? And let's be really clear. I just want to clarify with everybody here. You do not all own lesbian sports bars. You own women's sports bars, and you are queer owners of those. So I just want to make that very clear for everyone. So I want to start with Jenny, our premier trailblazer. You've been leading the way the past few years, and just share with everybody what inspired you to open the sports bra, and what was your vision in creating visibility for queer women in the sports community with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so lifelong sports fan, particularly basketball, you know, fell in love with basketball, tried some other sports, didn't really like them. And stuck with basketball like my whole life. And it was kind of like my first love and the first thing that I was pretty good at. And I played it until I was 19, blew out my ACL, and then had to kind of change trajectories. And then I fell in love with cooking shortly after that. And so kind of really these two spaces that made up a giant portion of my young adulthood and then leading into adulthood was really basketball and food. And when I recovered from my ACL surgery, I continued to play basketball, and it was just this community that I had built, and it was everyone that I knew and loved was really from pickup basketball. And it was people who were like doctors, post office workers, construction, all these folks that I really clearly, I don't think I would have ever met them if it wasn't for basketball bringing us together. So this sense of community, friendship, love, passion, it kind of transcended all of our differences. And it was just this beautiful rainbow of folks. And that group had kind of a high percentage of queer folks in it. And so we were just really bonded that way. And we started to celebrate together, celebrate birthdays, weddings, anniversaries, all the things. And, more often than not, our celebrations would take us to a sports bar. Mm. And it was really hit or miss how our experiences were at these spaces. Mm-hmm. And for as long as I can remember, those experiences were par for the course. It was very much like, what's going to happen? Like, are we going to get the game on? Is the food going to be crappy? Is there going to be, something like a non-alcoholic beverage that is going to be delicious? Like there was all of these things. And so, and I hadn't put any thought behind it. It was just the status quo. And it wasn't until years later where, the pandemic happened. I had been unemployed, or fun employed, as some folks call it, because I was willfully unemployed, that I started to wonder, what can I do? How can I contribute to the community? I had really kind of just been like living the easy life. And when the pandemic happened, it really changed my focus onto how can I build and grow, and help? Like, how did I want to show up for the world? And really, I had these two parts of my life, basketball and food, and I was just like, put those two things together. I don't know what that could possibly be, but I had this idea for the sports bra, that had kind of came out from this necessity of like a fantasy place that kind of was like where we kind of put all of our frustrations when we went to sports bars. It was just like, oh God, can you imagine if we wanted to watch a gymnastics championship or whatever, that we could just go to a sports bar and have it on, and be like, and so then I created this fantasy place called the Sports Bra, and it wasn't until 2020 where that kind of little fantasy place became kind of a seed for an idea, and I was kind of curious if it was possible or if it could work. So I did a bunch of research, and then I realized that nobody had done it yet. And I didn't know that at the time. And so I was like, oh my God, nobody's done it before. Like, you know, not going to be me. But what really tipped the scales was thinking about a young version of myself walking into a space like the sports bra, and how much of a difference that would have made as a kid to come into a place where I felt like I belonged. And, I had the conversation with my girlfriend at the time about how, if we were 7, we walked in, what would it feel like? And she was just like, what if we were 15? What if we were 19? What if we were 21, 25, 35? And then we both realized that we had never walked into a space where we felt fully seen, fully represented in all of our ways. And it was kind of at that moment where I was just like, you know, I'm not sure I can do it for me personally, but I can do it for the young version of myself. And if some young kid comes into the space, the sports bra that I put all of my time and effort and money into, and it changes how they view themselves and how they view their place in the world, how they view their place in sports. And then if the whole thing crashes and burns in like 6 months, if I could change one person, one kid, it would matter, right? It would matter, and I can be like, at least I tried. And so to me, the risk rewards were very different, from when I had just first thought of it. I was like, this is way too much risk. Who knows what the reward would be? But yeah, so that's kind of how it started. And then when we talk about creating a queer space, I was super tunnel vision about women's sports. So I actually didn't see it that way. Um, and in fact, the first time that I'd heard that was from my mom. I sat down my parents. I was 40 years old. I sat down my parents and I just wanted to tell them what I was up to next. And, they hated it. And mom was like, we're in a pandemic right now. Do you think right now is a good time to open a lesbian bar? And nowhere in my like elevator pitch did I ever mention, but mom is, she's keen. And she put like the two things together. And I was just like, what? A lesbian bar? And I was like, oh, right. Like, no, that's not what we're doing here. But as soon as the word hit the street, it was just like, oh my God, Portland's getting a lesbian bar. And we just like leaned into it. We were just like, no, but yes.
It is a
Um,
no, but yes.
yeah, yeah. And then there was like directories, like lesbian gay directories reaching out. I was just like, yeah, put us on the map. I mean, if it's going
Yeah.
to bring people through the door. And then it became like people coming in and being like, thank you for creating this space. And I was just like, I didn't know that that's what I was doing when I created a space for myself. Like that's what I really was doing. I was just like, what's the kind of place I want to be in? And without even knowing it, my life experience had, there's an intersectionality to my life experience that I was just like, oh,
Yeah.
the first week
Yeah.
we opened the doors, there was a lot of Vietnamese women that came in. And again, like totally about women's sports. And then suddenly the Vietnamese community as a whole, and then Vietnamese women and girls were coming and, talking to me about the business. And I was just like, oh, right. Like it's not just women's sports. It's like it's like a web, right? A whole network of things.
Yeah.
So
That's the
yeah, yeah,
microcosm of society. You had me
exactly.
at basketball and food. And then
Mm.
you really had me at basketball, food, and kids. And then you add basketball, food, kids, lesbians. I'm all in. Jillian, I see you nodding your head quite a bit. What resonates with you about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for me, we had so much of the same thing in the Twin Cities. As soon as we announced, everybody was saying like, "Oh, it's a lesbian bar," and I was really adamant at the beginning to make sure that we weren't perceived that way. So a little bit of a different approach than Jenny, only because my we were seeing a lot of negativity around being a lesbian bar. We were seeing a lot of people saying like, oh, it's only going to be for the dykes, or it's only going to be, and we were like, holy cow, like So we pretty quickly changed our verbiage and how we spoke about it from a women's sports bar to a bar that shows exclusively women's sports, which doesn't roll off the tongue as quickly and beautifully. But we really wanted to be clear about what we were doing and what we were all about. And I think for us too, we've seen the same thing. I mean, you brought it up, Shelly, in the intro, was that, I do think that we have become this incredibly inclusive space. I joke all the time that I think the Venn diagram between women's sports fans and queer women is almost a circle, but not entirely. And so we do have those outer edges of, the queer women that come in that are like, I don't know anything about sports. And I'm like, cool, come on in. And then the diehard cis white men that come in to watch Lynx games or so I do think that we kind of have the combination of those two things too. And I think for me, that was really eye-opening, was like, how many sports bars are owned by white men, white cis straight men? We don't call them white straight cis men bars, but because I'm a queer woman, it's all of a sudden a queer bar. I'm like, that is a jump that I was not taking. So I was really with Jenny in that regard, that like, the being a lesbian bar was not at all what I anticipated being received as. And I think we have served a really, really important space for our queer community in the Twin Cities, especially in this current administration with anti-trans legislation and everything like that. Like, we've really served an important place for our community to feel welcomed and safe. So
There's no doubt. I mean, you're so vocal on social media. It's been a real gift for the community. Yeah, big time love for that. Jax, I want to turn to you. What have you experienced in terms of challenges or triumphs starting a women's sports bar related to being queer?
Yeah, similar to Jillian and Jenny, look, we made history not because we were a queer bar, but because we're a women's sports bar. And that was how I've been leading the whole time. But of course, we're inclusive. That's in our mission. And we want everybody to know that we're a queer space. So, I mean, hey, put them together. My wife and I own Watch Me Sports Bar. So there's that. But I mean, we were receiving tons of hate as we were getting open. I had to turn off my notifications on IG because every morning I'd wake up being battered. It was brutal. I think maybe I've spoken to a couple of you about that. And thank God for Jenny and Jillian at that time, I have to say, because I was able to reach out and get support at a time when we really needed it. And I, in particular, I'm an empath, so I'm taking it all in. And so I had to get support from my friends here. So thank you, you two. But we're battling through the hate in true Watch Me spirit. And, we got the keys on June 1st. We opened July 26th and flipped it in like a crazy amount of time. And we got our business license the day before we opened. So it was absolute madness. And there was no stopping me because once I set my brain to something, it's going to happen. And so it was a lot to get through, everything that could go wrong. I'm sorry, Rikki's friends, you are going to experience some stuff, but everything that could happen was happening to us, and we just battled through it. And in terms of triumphs, there are already too many to count. We're up to almost our 9-month mark, and from people who are weepy, thanking us for creating this space, to having superstars in here, most recently Billie Jean King walking in the door with Alana. I mean, that was just absolutely, and I had been working hard on that one for a really long time, and for it to happen was just insane. So lots of triumphs, and we're stabilizing, and we're getting here, and we're not going anywhere. And so that I see as a huge triumph in itself.
Amazing. And you talk about the support needed. I mean, I forgot to show off my shirt, Lesbian Visibility Week. Yeah, hashtag.
Good one.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Franco, for that. The support is needed, and let's turn over to Sara and Danielle, because everybody's asking. They're going to be opening Rikki's in San Francisco. Highly anticipated. I know you're constantly being asked about when you're going to open. You can reveal that today if you want to. Otherwise, I can move on. This would be a safe space to do that. But when you do open the bar, what are your plans for fostering community within the bar, like creating a safe space for queers?
Yeah, so we're targeting opening late May. Current target, like everyone said, lots of things could go wrong, those permits and plumbing and electrical and all the things, but that's our current target right now. So really excited to bring the same energy that you've all created in your different spaces into San Francisco. I think one thing that really jumps out to me and what you said, Jenny, in terms of creating community and the type of space that you have, and is historically with lesbian bars, those were the hubs and the one place that you could go to find community at a time when you couldn't find community elsewhere. Especially for the Rikki Striker bars in San Francisco and kind of what we've named the bar after. And we really wanted to create a space that brought in that same energy, but wasn't completely centered around alcohol and alcohol consumption. Knowing that burns people out and has burned people out in the past, and that's not what everyone is into. So I think the combination of women's sports, whether you're playing women's sports, with your community, or you're a fan of women's sports, brings in this attitude and this energy of, it doesn't have to be all alcohol. It's also food. It's also, you bring in kids. It can be people of all ages and all demographics. So I think that, really speaking to that, and also the queer community, like history in it, is what we're really aiming for.
Awesome. Danielle, anything to add to that?
Just like second the community piece of it. And I think when we were trying to figure out a name and kind of a direction for at the time, we're both Libras, so our LLC is named after that, because we obviously as Libras couldn't figure out a name to save our lives. But when we were looking for a direction, it was, kind of looking around the community, and knowing that San Francisco has a history of queer women, of queer inclusive sports. The gay games were founded here. It's, something that we recognize, like, we might be the first women's sports bar opening in San Francisco, but we're not the first of any of the pieces of women's sports and bars. So we wanted to, reflect the community, the people. You mentioned Franco, Shelly, one of our legends within our community and in San Francisco. So we really want to make sure that we pull all of those folks in, and create space for folks of all ages.
Awesome. Thank you. And I'll just put a little plug in, Julia, because I know that there are events going on all over the country every day this week through to Sunday night, celebrating Lesbian Visibility Week. And I'm sure Julia will put in the chat, there it is, about how to find those events so that you can plug in arts, health, sports, obviously, music, all kinds of different things going on. And we'll talk a little bit more about some other sports panels coming up. You bring up Rikki Striker, and heard the great sports queen herself, Billie Jean, mentioned. I know that when I was younger and I was working in the WNBA, I was the only fully out person that I knew of. There were lots of people who were queer in the W for sure, but it was not a celebrated thing. And I was even asked, a couple of times to kind of tone it down. And I know that I had some queers in my life growing up, but they weren't necessarily out, softball coach, little league softball coach, or high school gym teacher. Any of you have any queer lesbian role models growing up, or in your younger years, or related to your coming out, whenever that was for you?
Who doesn't? I can say, well, I'm just going to say it. My softball coach in high school, I think, probably opened my eyes to some things that I was maybe uncertain about until that time. And then I saw myself sort of gravitating towards similar people. And that was when I started to discover, oh, hey, maybe I'm a little bit different than everybody else. And so for me, I'd probably say my high school softball coach was it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Anybody else?
I had a high school basketball coach. And I mean, I feel like this is probably really not PC, but the basketball coach and the assistant coach were dating. And there was probably, I don't know, 18 years between the two of them. And so, we had kind of this older female role model who had just gotten a divorce from her husband with a kid who I was in high school with. And then this 24-year-old who had just got done playing college ball, and actually practiced for the Portland Power back in the day. And so there was this kind of weird dichotomy where there was somebody kind of closer to my age, and then this like really powerful coach figure. And I wasn't out, but I had known since I was probably, I don't know, too young to really know. I feel like my first crush was in kindergarten. Um, but I just remember that she smelled like strawberry shortcake. Anyway, it's a whole other story. And but I would say that having those two to kind of model this really, here was this woman who had been married and she fell in love with a woman and she left all of that, and to kind of like watch how she raised her son, how she handled a divorce, and then how she like navigated this really great age range. So there was a lot of things playing against her at the time, but she held her own. And I was just like, God, if she can do all of that, maybe there is some chance. But like I feel like, outside of my best friend and a couple of my family members, those two were the first two that I really talked to about how I'd been feeling for like basically my whole life. So yeah, definitely having having folks that are in positions of power too, who can kind of model, that it's okay and that things are hard, but they get through it. And I just remember being in high school and thinking like that it would be the end of the world if I ever said anything to anybody, and then to see them kind of like living their best life really together, it was just like, oh, okay, there is another way for this to happen.
And I would say mine is completely different in that, like, I don't think I did. I mean, I really didn't have any. I mean, I grew up in a small town in southern Minnesota and don't remember seeing or like being around any out women until I was in college. And it was my voice teacher at the time. And I was a music major. So she was somebody very important to me. But I didn't have any lesbian role models. And I think that is, when I hear Jenny talk about opening the sports bra for, younger Jenny, it's like I didn't come out till much later in my life. And I think a big part of it was like I just never saw it. Like I didn't know that it was possible, or that it was, you would hear things about Ellen on TV or whatever, but like that was my awareness until, I was much older and in college. And so I do think that, I love the fact that we are in a place now where, although things are very difficult still, I do think that queer women in particular are a lot more vocal and visible for young kids. I have a non-binary nephew who came out when they were 13 years old, and I was like, I didn't even know what non-binary was until I was 35 years old, and so I think that it's wonderful that through all these different lenses of sports and culture and music and all of these things, that queer women in particular are becoming so much more visible, that it's a lot easier for young kids and young Jennies and young Jillians to have lesbian sports icons, or even just regular lesbian role models. And I think we all play a really big part in that, whether that's part of our plan or not. I think that is absolutely part of what we all do.
No
Yeah,
doubt about it.
Jillian, that like resonates with me a bit. I don't think I had a particular lesbian role model that I knew about exactly, but I had a babysitter and neighbor when I was in elementary school, who just kind of like let me be me, as a little kid in the neighborhood. Turns out she's queer, unsurprisingly. But I just remember knowing that there was something different and unique about her as a older person that I looked up to, and feeling like cared for, and allowed to kind of like be whoever I wanted to be and play sports. And obviously, as an elementary school kid, and I don't know if she knew she was queer at the time, let alone me, but there was just something there about kind of banding together and kind of feeling a little different.
Yeah.
One of my favorite Broadway songs comes from the musical Fun Home, Ring of
Yes.
Keys.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's that I know you right there. Sara, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say I also didn't have a lesbian role model besides maybe I could say the L word. I don't think that really counts as a role model. But I weirdly had allies. Like I had a vice principal guy, cis white guy that was my basketball coach, and he was really big in the local basketball, like girls, women's community. And so I think he immediately knew what was up with me and was just like you said, Danielle, kind of let me be who I was and supported that. And not everyone gets that chance. So I'm really lucky to have them.
It's really beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. When we talk about visibility and more happening, there are more athletes with prominent places in sports who are out. And, you can name so many in every sport, and it continues to grow, and their presence on social media is so important too. This really is for anybody, but how do you think queer women are represented in sports right now? And then do you see a role in that narrative?
I mean, I think it's impossible now. And granted, I know that my Instagram feed is like 95% women's sports. And so I know that I'm terminally online in the women's sports world, but I do think that it's virtually impossible to ignore queer women in sports right now, which I think is such a wonderful representation for everybody, right? Not just for the young queer kids, but for the straight young kids who are, never have met a queer person. I think it's great for diehard sports fans that have always maybe made stereotypical comments to see lesbian women and queer women out killing the game and doing things really well and really powerfully. I think that it's a huge part of the sports world, and not surprisingly, the WNBA led the way in a lot of that work, and as they have in so many other social movements for sports in general. And I think that for me, it's the trailblazing nature of women that have just been like, I'm done pretending. I'm done trying to hold it in. I think of Lasia Clarendon. I was literally just emailing with Lasia, so she's top of mind for me right now. But Lasia coming out and being the first non-binary player in the WNBA as she was playing for the Lynx. I mean, it was such a huge moment in our history in terms of where we are now and where we've come from. And to see that paved the road for the Quins and for the, all of these other non-binary athletes that have come out since Lasia did. And I think that same role model aspect, again, it's weird. Jenny and I have talked about this often, that like the publicity piece on me in this whole bar is by far the least comfortable part of this whole thing for me. It's not why I got into this, and it's not my favorite part of it, but I do realize that it's a position that, I respect and am very honored to have, that I think that, I'm not used to being a person that people know. Shelly sat across me at Lynx games for 10 years and knows that I'm a very obnoxious, loud Lynx fan. And now all of a sudden I'm the women's sports bar that's a really loud, obnoxious Lynx fan. So all of a sudden I feel myself watching my moves a little bit more than I have in the past. But I do think that it's an important part to recognize the role that we are playing, whether or not that's why we destined to do this or not. But I do think it is important.
No doubt. Well, we've heard about, Jax, you mentioned Billie Jean coming in, and I know Jenny and Jillian, you've been able to experience that too. And Danielle and Sara, I'm sorry, because you chime in as you can. You can think about what would be your favorite moment so far in having the sports bar. What are some of the things that have really stood out to you as like the most exciting, rewarding things? Jax, do you want to, in addition to the great?
You know what? I have had several moments where I actually had one not long ago. I posted on my personal IG. I was having a moment. I was up here. We have kind of like an upstairs loft area, and I often take my laptop out of the office and go sit there so I can see all the games too while I'm working. And I happened to look down, and it was filled with all types of people, every age, every gender, every race, everything. It was just beautiful. It was this cool moment. And so I took a picture, and just I was having this just like visceral reaction to the fact that I actually did this. And it was insane to me that one, that I finally saw my dream come true, and two, my evolution that I see for Watch Me and what I have in the plans and in the works for us as we kind of move forward. But I mean, absolute win for us as a community of women's sports bars that we are filling these spaces. It just proves our point of why we're here, right? There's been a void forever, and we're just plugging it. So yeah, that's my most recent one.
We might not be open yet, but one thing for me, one sign of like this needs to happen. We're doing the right thing. The risk is worth it, and all the work was actually the Valkyries expansion draft, the watch party that we had for that. So the expansion draft was like 30 minutes, and it's really like 10 minutes of content, 10 minutes of commercials, 10 minutes of commentary about the selections. Frankly, it's a really exciting day, but frankly, not that much actually happening. And the brewery here, shout out to Standard Deviant, anybody in San Francisco, they are a huge reason that we're able to move forward and have supported us, behind the scenes and in hosting events. But 30 minutes before the expansion draft started, they were full. There was not a seat. There were 100 people in the brewery 30 minutes before a single team expansion draft. And it was like, okay, this is going to work. People want this. People need this.
It was at like 3:30 in the afternoon too. And there was a whole group of people who drove from Sacramento to get there, which is, I don't know, like an hour and a half drive, 2 hours.
On a Monday.
Yeah, like it's wild. And like the Valkyries didn't know if they were going to host an event. So we kind of collaborated with them. We were like, I guess we'll just do it and see who shows up, and it'll be fun. I agree with you, Danielle. That was a wild one.
That's amazing. That's amazing. If you build it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I often say that I say often that one of my favorite moments actually had absolutely nothing to do with sports, but I think goes to really show the power of community that has been built at a bar of their own, both physically and in the virtual space. I say often that I care as much as making our online presence as safe space as I do our physical space. So I spend a lot of time blocking people on the internet that I just am like, you're no longer, you have given up the privilege of commenting on our Facebook pages and our Instagram pages. But we, in about, gosh, it was probably December now. I got reached out to on Instagram by somebody who said, I'm from Wisconsin. I'm coming to Minneapolis today with my family because my wife and I, my fiance and I, are getting married in Minneapolis, and our witnesses just came down with COVID. And so they can't be there. We don't know anybody else in Minneapolis, but we wanted to get married in a queer friendly state. Wondering if you could maybe help us connect with some nonprofits or somebody that might be willing to serve as our witnesses. And so I was like, oh my gosh, this is perfect. And I messaged my staff right away, and two of my bartenders were like, oh my God, I'd love to go. So two of my bartenders went and met this random couple and their 3 children at the courthouse in Minneapolis. And I asked them to please come to the bar afterwards so that we could buy them dinner. And they came to the bar. And while the ceremony was happening, I had reached out to my neighbor who owns this wonderful, amazing bakery, and he made a wedding cake for them. I reached out to this local florist down the street, and they provided this big bouquet of flowers and some gifts. And we told everybody at the bar what was happening. It was, again, middle of the day, like 2:00 on a Thursday. But we told everybody at the bar that was happening. We played a bunch of music when they walked in, and like this beautiful new rainbow family walked in, completely overwhelmed and just like
it was one of those moments where I was like, man, like literally when things are burning and on fire everywhere, like all we have is each other. And I'm just reminded of that so constantly. And so to feel like we could be a place to help make that moment happen for that family. They sent us a Christmas card. They've invited us to come stay at their Airbnb. So it's just been this really wonderful thing that happened just because they followed us on social media and thought that we would be a safe space for them to reach out to. And like, again, as Jenny said earlier, like to know that you can have that impact on one person is insane. And especially to have such a part in such a huge day in their lives, it was pretty wonderful.
Now, I follow a lot of people on social media, and I wouldn't ask them to be, help me get somebody to come to my wedding. So it's not just that you have presence, it's because of how you are doing it and the stage that you are setting. And yeah, that is the community and the welcoming space that you are creating, Jillian. That's
Thanks,
really
Shelly.
beautiful, really beautiful. What about you, Jenny?
Oh my gosh, there are so many. We just celebrated our 3-year anniversary, and in a lot of ways, I feel like it feels like 15 years. Like so much has happened, and I think everything from having my absolute childhood and current um, heroes in the bar to exactly what Jillian is talking about, kind of these random cases of community showing up um, are some of the most beautiful times. And Jax, when you talked about sitting up there and having that moment, I want to give you mad props for letting that happen because I think oftentimes we're so in it, we're up to our eyeballs in it. And there are very few and far between moments where you take it in and you can enjoy it, even if it's brief. Um, but that moment you described, I've had a couple times. And when things get real hard, you have to think about that time to keep it going. Um, so so continue to grab those moments because you deserve it. You deserve that. Um, I've definitely had those moments. I've had, superstar moments. We've had community moments. There's thousands to talk about. I think one that, you know, happened early on that I think about a lot is we the Portland Thorns won the national championship the first year that we were open. And I had met somebody from the NWSL and they invited me to the championship game far before we knew the Thorns were going to be there. And I was like, yes, absolutely. I would love to attend. And as it got closer, I was like, oh my God, maybe Portland will be in there. And then I'm at the stadium and we're there and our fan group, the Rose City Riveters, they flew like 400 people from our Portland Thorns fan group to show up. And so I see them showing up and they're cheering super loud and we end up winning. And so right before it timed out, I ran down because I was in a different section. I ran down to their section. I like barged my way in and I was like cheering with them, celebrating. Fireworks are going off. People are like, oh, the sports bros here. And it was really awesome. And then right then I get a phone call from my server, one of my servers back in Portland. And she had FaceTimed me and I click on it and it was everybody in the bar, full house, and they're cheering in Portland. And I'm with the Riveters, cheering in DC. And it was just like this coast to coast cross country moment that it was like 10 seconds long. I wish that I'd recorded it. I wish I had like the wherewithal to like really capture all of it. But I was just like, this is happening. Like when will this ever happen again? And it was just, and so like I wasn't even there, but there was this moment of all like this united fandom. So that's something that I think I will cherish forever. I mean, like I said, there's actually thousands of these
Of
moments.
course there are.
And
Yeah.
I just feel like I need to like write them down, or I'll just tell you guys can record it for posterity for when I'm old and I can't remember anything. And then we can be like, remember that time?
That's right.
Yeah. So that's definitely one of the big ones that happened early on, and I was just like, wow, this
Yeah.
is cool.
That sounds so powerful. So
It was
powerful.
awesome. It was awesome.
We have, we're going to move to Q&A in just a minute, but we do have a couple more events going on Saturday in Long Beach and Minneapolis. Jax, do you want to share first about what's happening at Watch Me?
Sure. We are really excited for our panel. We've got Evan Unruh from LA 84. We've got Dr. Julie Shaw on the panel. We've got Carmen Bona from ACFC. Really excited to get to meet her. And I'm forgetting somebody.
Rachel Pearson with ESPN. Yep.
Yes, with the ESPN. So really, really amped for this. It's going to be an exciting day and looking forward to getting to know all of them better and just have a really cool conversation with these amazing humans. So yeah, that's happening at 3 o'clock on Saturday.
3 o'clock Pacific, Long Beach, Watch Me Bar. And then Jillian, what do you have going on Saturday Central?
Morning. Yeah,
I know,
Saturday
I almost
morning.
said it.
Yeah, so yeah, same. We're super excited to be hosting a panel about queer women in sports, moderated by Jana Shortle, the Care 11 moderator that here in the Twin Cities in the community has been a queer icon for a lot of people. One of the first news anchors to kind of buck the system about what you needed to do to be in media. But we'll have the incredible Sylvia Broughton, who shout out is actually on the call today. Sylvia is the head coach.
Sylvia.
I know, head coach of our women's professional rugby team, the Twin Cities Gemini. Super excited to have Sylvia representing the Gemini. And then we have Chelsea Falzone, who is the manager of youth programs for the Minnesota Twins. And I have said forever that when Minnesota gets a women's professional baseball team, it'll be because of Chelsea. She is such an absolute just baller when it comes to women in baseball and has been doing this work for so long, and is just a wonderful human being. So super excited to have Chelsea there. And then we'll also have Kate Voss from the Minnesota Lynx speaking. And so we'll also be live streaming that panel. So in addition to having the in-person panel, we're going to work on live streaming that panel as well. So folks can register to be there either in person and be part of the fun and have some brunch with us, or they can join the panel virtually online.
Right on. Thank you. Awesome. Julia, any questions coming up?
So I just mentioned in the chat again, if you have questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat and I'll read them out. You can also raise your hand virtually or physically, and I'll put you in the queue and let you talk. But the first question we had was from Michelle Hobbs. What type of volume are you experiencing? My concern is, can I fill the place? I'm in a small market.
I can start. I know there's 3 of us that are open right now. I mean, I think it really depends. I've talked with lots of women that are looking at doing this in their own communities, as I know Jax and Jenny have as well. And I think the things that I always tell people is to figure out what your fan base is, like who is your crew that you think are going to be your regulars, because I think that is definitely the good thing to have. Some of you might know about Icarus, the women's sports bar that was open in Salem, Oregon for a while. And ultimately what they realized was like, they just didn't have enough of a consistent women's sports fan base to make it work there. And so it's the reality that you have to figure out what your base is. Who are your demographic that are going to come? Minneapolis is also obviously very lucky to have lots of professional women's sports teams. And so we have a wide demographic to choose from. But I would say, are we busy every day? Absolutely not. People are like, I'm afraid to come because I don't want to wait in line, or I don't think I'm going to get in. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to post on social media when there's nobody sitting in the bar. That doesn't make for great content. But the reality is there are plenty of times that you can come in without any reservation, without anything, walk in and get your favorite seat at the bar. And so I think that, it's certainly ups and downs. We are very event driven. We have lots of big crowds for big events. And also have really great food and beverages when you want to come in and discover some other women's professional sport that you maybe haven't seen. That's been a huge priority for us. So I don't know if Jax and Jenny have anything to add.
Yeah, I can hop in. I echo what you're saying about events. I mean, I'm in the background hustling, filling non-game nights with events. And who knew how that trivia was so big? So we've got trivia, we've got live music. We've even taken a shot at having a DJ night, which didn't really work out, but then DJ brunch is something else that is working out. So I think it's really being you need to be nimble. You just need to be able to test things out, and if they work, expand on them. If they don't, move on to something else. And as long as you're flexible, you're going to figure it out. But yeah, I mean, we get standing room only typically for ACFC away games. Any NWSL events, our U.S. Women's National Team are hopping in here. WNBA is really hopping too. But outside of those, it is a trick. It's definitely a trick with scheduling staff and trying to look at a crystal ball. And we are just at that 9-month mark, so we don't have tons of trends to look at yet. So definitely something that you have to be aware of as you kind of head into this. You know, look at each day as its own entity and sort of learn and move on.
I'd just
Totally.
add, like,
Yeah.
us trying to host watch parties. We've been popping up at the brewery I mentioned, but a couple other places as well, and it's really helped us understand what people come out for. Obviously, we are in like a good sized city with a lot of queer women, especially, and 2 brand new, women's pro teams, making a lot of noise, getting a lot of media attention. But it's also helped us change the space we were looking for. We were originally looking not to have a kitchen to try to keep things simple, but it became clear our demographic, our customers coming to the watch parties wanted a kitchen, wanted to bring kids. And in California, you have to have food to do that. And it also made us look at, be confident signing a lease for a little bit larger space. So try it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that, Jax and Jillian nailed almost everything that you can think about and do. I know that for our first year, I was so adamant about just sticking at being a sports bar. Like, folks were asking for trivia, for drag night, like all kinds of things. I was like, nope, we're going to be just sports. Let's see how it goes. And, we had like this main rush that lasted 3-4 months. That was awesome. And then it started to be like, okay, you know what? Let's listen to the community, because what we really did was we built a community that just wasn't about sports. And so they found this safe space, they found their third place, and they wanted other things to live there besides sports. Sports is a bonus for these folks. Everything else was why they were there. They wanted community. And so we leaned into that. And some of those nights are the biggest. We held our very first singles night. I was like, no, I do not want to do a singles night, la la la, this, that, and the other thing. We held our first singles night. It was just like out of control. You'd think that there was like a championship game or something. It was like madhouse, and it blew up like our socials. We ended up having multiples. Like it was just like different themes, speed dating, like, yeah. So it was really huge. So again, being flexible, listening to your community and leaning in, and also keeping in the forefront of your mind what your mission is and what your goals are, so that you don't stray too far, because people are like, if you're for everybody, you're for nobody, so like making sure that you have your lane and that things touch on it. And with a women's sports bar, a lot of things touch on it. So
Thank you, guys. Those are great. Julia, what else do we have coming up?
Yeah, so we have a couple of questions, and I think that one of the questions that I'll ask the panelists to maybe just write in the chat is like, who's available to be a contact afterwards for folks who are interested in starting their own business like this, and maybe are trying to find community in that. But we'll go on to Andrea's question about, how do you manage broadcasting rights permissions to all the games that you want to show?
Maybe we could just have one of you speak to that with the time.
Jax, I think Jax.
You did so well.
Sorry, I was typing in the chat. I totally missed it. What's the question?
The question is, how do you manage broadcasting rights or permissions to all the games that you want to show?
Jillian and Jenny, I gave you props earlier, and now look, this is what I get. I think we've reached out to several streaming services, and we've gotten their written permission for streaming rights. And we show what we can, and that's what we do. How's that?
Yeah, I will fill in and say, like, even we've been amazed, even in the first year since we've been open, and Jenny, I'm sure, has seen this even more so, is like, more and more things are on cable now that we don't need to have as many streaming networks access as we used to. But a lot of times people just don't understand and realize that, like, just because you can show it on your TV at home doesn't mean I can show it in my business, because commercial licensing is absolutely a thing. And I tend to take the follow of Jenny's lead, that I tend to be much more rule followy. This is one thing that I am a very rule follower about. I'm a rule breaker in a lot of ways, but
We know that.
but
We know that.
but I don't want to get fined for showing something that I don't have commercial streaming privileges for. And so, honestly, I think the things that we often get contacted by, that people want to reach out to, are often really kind of more obscure sports. And so, like, just this last week, we showed like snowboarding, off-roading something. I honestly couldn't even explain it to you what it was. But in those situations, like, it's showing on a YouTube channel, I have to reach out to the content owner of whatever YouTube channel it is, or it wasn't a YouTube, it was a website, to be able to show that. And again, as Jack said, like, we have a binder in our basement of written emails that we have gotten from folks that say, yes, you can show XYZ on X date on this streaming service. And it's a pain. Like, it's totally a pain. Like, Fubi and Tubi and Roku and all the other streaming services that exist, like, it's great. And it also makes it a lot more complicated. When I was just down here in Phoenix at Title IX, I was talking to Audrey, and she said, like, man, it is just hard to find things sometimes. And I'm blessed that my wonderful wife, Megan, spends between 8 to 10 hours a week making a television schedule for us of all of the different streaming services and things that we have, so that my staff can literally just be like, we're going to turn it to this, and we know that this channel or this game is going to be on. But it takes a ton of time. But I think that, again, I do think we've seen change in the year that we've been open, and I think that it's continuing to change. During the Final Four this year, everything was, during Women's March Madness, everything was on cable. Last year, we had to have ESPN Plus, or try to figure out if we could get ESPN Plus, or all of these different things. And like, this year, every single game was on cable, which was incredible. It also means it's more accessible for all fans, which is wonderful. It means maybe less people come into bars to watch it. So maybe we're breaking our own business problems. But anyway, it's great. It's great. We see a lot of that change happening.
That's great. Thank you. So we have only limited time left. So I'm going to ask Hannah what her question is, and then we'll do a little bit of debrief about some other events going on and let y'all get on with your day. So Hannah, what is your question?
Hi, everyone. First, wanted to thank you guys for having this panel and for creating these third spaces. I moved across country to Portland a few years ago by myself, and the sports bra is where I made so many of my friends, and we made our best memories in the city. And now I'm in SF, and I'm really excited for Rikki. So I'm so happy that this is happening. My question is about the online community that we've seen a rise of, especially with these media companies like Together and just women's sports. How has that either kind of helped with what you're doing, and how have you tried to lean into that online space when we, have so many people nationwide, like Jenny was talking about, that are kind of a part of this massive community that you all are helping to build?
I mean, I guess I'll take it. I think it's been awesome. I mean, I feel like, everybody has said this, and it's so true, but a rising tide lifts all ships. And when there's more access, representation, more of these stories being told, that's what really grabs fans and speaks to them and makes not just the athletes enjoyable to watch, which they already are, the skill set is there, but there's this other level, there's this emotional connection, there's this relationship that's being built because more about these folks. And a lot of it has to do with social media, the fact that players have the ability to build their own brands and speak their truths, all of these things that, folks often ask me, where do I see women's sports going? And they're generally trying to get me to compare it to men's sports. And I try not to do that because, one, I don't think men's sports is the default. And two, I think that men's sports has failed a lot of people, including the players, teams, fans, and the whole ecosystem. So I think women's sports has the opportunity to change the narrative. And really flip the status quo. We're constantly talking about flipping the status quo. But I think that one thing is that as women, people expect us to be more emotional. And so we have the freedom to be more emotional. And it's those emotions and those stories that connect to human beings, whatever gender you are. And so to me, that is the rise of women's sports will, in my mind, be greater because of those things. And folks like Together, Just Women's Sports, The Gist, and all of these little guys that are coming up and out, they're the ones that are solidifying and speaking to and creating fandom. And it works both directions, right? It's fantastic for the athletes, but it's also fantastic for the community. And you can take somebody who's, you know, a fair weather fan, and they read a couple articles in The Gist, and they become they see themselves in that story, right? And it becomes relatable, and so it breaks down that third wall between an athlete and a fan. And with women's sports, that is the thing. That's the real magic is right there. And so when I think about those online platforms and what they're doing, absolutely crucial to this entire thing.
And the playoff of Together, everybody watches queer women play sports. You always have, and you always will, whether you knew it or not. And I see, some comments in the chat too, and I just want to say this is a great example of women climbing the ladder and pulling more women up with them. A community that supports each other thrives and is a great example for other communities as well. And thank you all for being here today, for all your time and energy. And then I'll turn it over to Julia to close us up.
Yeah, right before I say the outro statements, I just wanted to check in with our folks from Rikki's about Sunday shenanigans in City Hall. What's up with that? What are you guys doing for that?
Yeah, so I think it's a Thursday this week, is the flag raising at City Hall. Am I right on that? All of the folks, yeah. So yeah, we have an awesome flag raising at City Hall, and everyone's welcome to join, and the details are on the website.
And the City Hall, San Francisco City Hall has external lights that kind of light up the building with different colors. So a little bit later that evening at dusk, San Francisco City Hall will be lit up for Lesbian Visibility Week. So come join.
Yes. Okay. So I just put a couple of links in the chat for everyone to check out. First of all, thank you to our incredible panelists and our moderator. Thank you to the Kerr Foundation and also Lesbian Visibility Week. I've really enjoyed this panel, and I really hope that you all have too. If you enjoyed this event, please consider donating. As a nonprofit, we rely on the generosity of our community to continue uplifting LGBTQ plus women and non-binary folks' stories and voices. So every contribution really makes a difference. The links I dropped in the chat are our donation page, our website, the Curve Magazine archive, and the Lesbian Visibility Week landing page. So feel free to explore, share, stay connected. And once again, thank you to our panelists. Thank you to everyone who's come. Happy Lesbian Visibility Week. For all of you who put your emails into the chat, I will be asking panelists who would like to share their contact information and try to get you all connected.
Thanks for having us.
Amazing.
Thank you all.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
everyone. Hope you have a great rest of your days.
You too.
Thank you. Bye.